Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today, we're heading back to ancient Greece. We're looking at, well, a really profound shift in how people thought the move from the early Ionians to what's called the Eleatic school.
It really is a major turning point. And right at the center of it, you've got these two key figures, Xenophanes of Colophon and Parmenides of Ilia.
Absolutely monumental figures.
And what's so fascinating, I think, is how they didn't just tweak ideas about gods.
Well,
They, uh, they fundamentally changed the game for thinking about reality itself.
that's a huge claim. So the big question for us today really is this. Parmenides' famous one being, his to Eon, was that just, the next logical step from Xenophanes' one great as God? Or was it something completely different, more radical?
Right, because there's this older view, you find it in Plato, Aristotle even.
Yeah.
They kind of saw Xenophanes as the founder, maybe even Parmenides' teacher, like a straight
Like
line.
a clear lineage, yeah.
But when you look closer, especially how modern scholars see it, well, yes, there are shared concepts, definitely an inheritance there. But there's also this huge break in how they argued in their method.
A methodological rupture, you called it.
Exactly. Xenophanes, he was this traveling poet, a critic of society. He used a mix of things, observation, reason, but also this awareness of limits, what we might call epistemic humility. He knew we don't know everything.
Okay, so kind of blended approach.
And Parmenides.
Parmenides was different, very different. A systematic thinker, a metaphysician. He basically kicks off this whole new philosophical era built on pure deductive proof. Logic that stands on its own, no observation needed, a priori stuff.
Wow, okay. So our plan for this deep dive, then, is to argue that Parmenides' one being is probably best seen as a kind of logical purification, a metaphysical abstraction, maybe, of Xenophanes' one God.
That's a good way to put it. Parmenides takes the core ideas, unity, being still, being eternal, but the reasons he gives, the justification, completely transformed. So gone is the appeal to, what's proper for a god, or looking at the world around us.
Right. Instead, Parmenides brings in this ironclad necessity of deductive logic. That's the game changer. It shifts the whole question away from what's the supreme God like to what is existence itself like.
And that's basically the birth certificate of ontology, the study of being.
Pretty much, yeah. Is a distinct field.
Okay, this sounds fascinating. So here's the plan. First, we'll dig into Xenophanes, his critique of religion, his own ideas about God, his complex methods.
Then we tackle Parmenides, his revolutionary logic, those really startling claims about what being is.
And finally, we'll bring them side by side, compare them directly to see how Parmenides' system is this radical but actually quite understandable response to the questions Xenophanes first raised.
Sounds like a plan.
Great. Let's start with Xenophanes. He wasn't just, an early philosopher. He was really shaking things up, attacking some of his culture's deepest beliefs.
Definitely. I mean, his most famous contribution, probably, is that sharp critique of the traditional Greek gods, the ones Homer and Hesiod wrote about, acting all too human.
Right. He had issues with them.
He attacked it on two fronts, really. First, the moral side. He condemned the gods for, well, behaving badly, theft, adultery, lying all the time, things humans do. It's a critique even Plato ran with later on.
Makes sense. But the second point was maybe even dipper.
I think so. He went after the whole idea of anthropomorphism, making gods in our own image. He saw that as just a fundamental mistake born from our own biases, our own cultures.
He famously said something like, mortals think gods are born, wear clothes like us, have voices and bodies.
Exactly. And he uses this almost ethnographic detail. He points out how Ethiopians make their gods black and snub-nosed, while Thracians give theirs blue eyes and red hair. It's sharp observation.
And then that killer argument, the reductio ad absurdum.
Ah, yes. If horses or oxen or lions had hands.
They'd draw gods that look just like them. A horse god, an ox god. It's brilliant.
It really is. It's more than just a joke. By putting Greek gods, barbarian gods, and even imaginary animal gods on the same level, he basically pulls the rug out from under anyone claiming special access to the divine just based on their tradition.
He's showing it's all projection, right? What you believe about gods just reflects, well, you.
Precisely. So it wasn't just that the content of Homeric theology was wrong, but the method, this uncritical, subjective way of creating it, was fundamentally flawed.
Okay, so he tears down the old view. But he wasn't just a critic, was he? He offered something positive, too.
No, absolutely. He wasn't just destructive. He proposed his own, well, rationalized theology, a different kind of supreme deity.
With key attributes, like unity.
Yes, unity and incomparability, that fragment. One God is greatest among gods and men. not at all like mortals in body or in thought. That establishes a radical difference. This God isn't just a bigger, stronger human.
Now, that phrase, greatest among gods, people have debated that, haven't they? Was he a strict monotheist, only one god? Or more like a henotheist, one top god among others?
That's been a long debate. But the consensus now sort of leans towards him introducing this novel idea of a single God with just extraordinary power. Maybe the focus wasn't so much on how many gods, but on the nature of the supreme one.
Okay, so a unique supreme god, totally unlike us. What else?
Then there's this idea of holistic perception. Whole he sees, whole he thinks, and whole he hears. A kind of perfect unified awareness, not like our fragmented way of sensing things.
An effortless power, too, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
but completely without toil, he shakes all things by the thought of his mind. No effort, just pure mental causation. A huge contrast to, Zeus throwing thunderbolts and wrestling titans.
And this is a big one. Immobility. Stillness.
Crucial. Abiding always in the same place, he moves not at all, nor is it seemly for him to travel. And notice the justification there is not seemly. It's about divine propriety.
Right. For a perfect being, moving around would be pointless, kind of beneath him.
Exactly. Which leads us nicely into his method because, well, it wasn't straightforward. Well, his theology, like the immobility point, seems grounded in this kind of rationalism based on propriety, what's fitting or pious. But then you look at his natural philosophy.
The sciencey bits.
Yeah, that stuff is rooted in observation, in naturalism. The famous example is the fossils finding seashells up on mountains and figuring out it meant huge floods must have happened in the past.
That sounds like proper scientific inference. Inference to the best explanation.
Totally. And he consistently demythologizes things. Rainbows aren't divine signs, they're just colored clouds. He takes the gods out of natural phenomena.
So on one hand, he's reasoning about what's seemly, and on the other, he's looking at fossils and clouds. It's quite a mix.
It really is. And perhaps holding it all together is this profound sense of epistemic humility, knowing the limits of knowing.
That comes out in that famous fragment, doesn't it, about truth?
The one that goes, and of course, the clear truth no man has seen, nor will there be anyone who knows about the gods and about all things they speak of.
For even if, in the best case, one happened to speak what is fully realized, he himself would not know it. But opinion, Dokos, is allotted to all.
Right, and that's not saying we know nothing. It's not extreme skepticism. It's drawing a line between absolute, certain truth, maybe only the divine has that, and human opinion or belief or conjecture, Dokos.
But this Dokos, this human opinion, it's not worthless.
Not at all. It's what we've got. And crucially, he suggests it can get better. He says something like, by searching, men in the course of time find them out better. So inquiry helps.
Okay, so wrapping up Xenophanes' method. His critique of anthropomorphism is really about our limited human viewpoint.
It's the key example for his bigger point. Human belief is always this perspective-bound Dokos. It's not a direct line to reality.
Which creates a kind of tension, methodologically speaking. Do we find truth by looking at the world, like with the fossils, or by reasoning about what's fitting for a perfect being, like the God not moving?
That's the nub of it.
Mm-hmm.
He uses both, Xenophanes does, but doesn't quite square the circle between them. He leaves that tension unresolved.
And that's where Parmenides comes in.
Precisely. Parmenides confronts this duality head-on. By going all in on the rationalist path and basically dismissing the empirical one, calling it the way of opinion, the path of the deaf and blind, he offers a really decisive, maybe extreme, but still a solution to the problem simmering in Xenophanes' work.
Right. So let's turn to Parmenides. If Xenophanes cleared a path, Parmenides, it sounds like, built a fortress of logic on it, a total methodological shift.
Completely. Forget just observing the world. Parmenides focuses on analyzing the very conditions for thinking and speaking at all.
And his poem on nature sets this up dramatically, doesn't it? It's framed as a goddess revealing the truth.
Yes, this youth is taken on a cosmic journey to meet a goddess who promises to teach him everything. That whole poetic setup gives his argument this air of absolute, undeniable authority.
And the goddess presents this stark choice, two paths, and only two.
A fork in the road, literally. She says, the one that it is Estin, and that it is not possible for it not to be. That's the path of persuasion, the path of truth.
The other, that it is not, ukestin, and that it is right that it not be. And this one?
This one, she says, is a path entirely unable to be investigated. You just can't go down that road.
Why not?
Because you can't know, think, or even speak about what is not. Trying to think about nothing isn't thinking. Trying to talk about nothing means your words don't refer to anything. It's impossible.
So that prohibition you can't deal in non-being, that's the absolute starting point.
That's the bedrock axiom. His entire system is deduced from that single point. You cannot think or speak of what is not.
Okay, so path 2 is blocked. We're on the path of what is, the way of truth. What does the goddess say we find there?
She lays out the signs, the samadha, the necessary characteristics of what is, or to eon. And crucially, every single one is derived by logic, by showing that the opposite would force you back onto that forbidden path of what is not.
It sounds relentless. What are these signs?
Well, first, what is must be uncreated and indestructible, eternal. It can't come into being.
Because that would mean it came from what is not, which is impossible.
Exactly. And it can't perish, because then it would have to become what is not. Also impossible. So eternal.
Makes sense logically. What else?
It has to be whole, continuous, indivisible, altogether one and continuous. No gaps, no empty spaces within it.
Because any gap would have to be what is not.
Right. Which can't exist.
Yeah.
So the idea of lots of separate things, plurality, that's out. It must be one continuous whole.
Wow. Okay. No beginning, no end, no divisions. What about change? Movement.
Also impossible. For something to move, it needs an empty space to move into a void, which is what is not.
Yeah.
For something to change, it has to become something it wasn't before, which again involves non-being in some way.
So what is just stuck.
Held in the hold of great chains, as the poem says. Bound by necessity. No alteration possible.
Good grief. And there's one more key description, right? Something about a sphere.
Yes, it's described as perfected on every side, like the mass of a rounded sphere. Now, that's probably not meant literally like a physical ball.
More like a metaphor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A metaphor for its absolute completeness, its uniformity, its finitude in the sense of being perfectly finished, lacking nothing, equally real everywhere.
So the final picture is reality is this single, eternal, unchanging, undifferentiated oneness.
That's the astonishing conclusion his logic forces him to.
And the method that gets him there is just as radical as the conclusion.
Absolutely. Parmenides is really the first thinker we see who explicitly says, ignore your senses.
Mm-hmm.
He warns you, the listener, turn away from mortals guided by the sightless eye and sounding ear and tongue. Instead, judge by reason, logos, the argument itself. The world our senses show us. That's the deceptive way of opinion, doxa.
Oh.
Only logic gets you to truth.
And the absolute core of this logical method is that really famous, really mind-bending fragment.
For the same thing as for thinking and for being.
Okay, let's unpack that. Does that mean that what is logically thinkable, that's what is real, and what's logically impossible to think just can't exist?
That's essentially it. If you cannot form a coherent thought of nothing existing, if the very concept is contradictory or empty, then nothing cannot actually exist in reality. The structure of thought mirrors, or even dictates, the structure of reality.
What's unthinkable is impossible.
That's the crux of it. What contradicts logic, like what is not, cannot be real.
Because of this incredibly rigorous, sustained use of deduction, he gets called the father of logic and father of metaphysics.
And rightly so. It's a complete flip from how people thought before. Earlier thinkers, Xenophanes included, tended to start with the world they saw and tried to figure out the principles behind it.
Bottom up, kind of.
Yeah. Parmenides goes top down. He starts with the most basic rule of thinking you can't contradict yourself, essentially the law of non-contradiction, and deduces what reality must be like to conform to that rule.
So what is has to be unchanging, whole, eternal. Not because we see it that way or because it feels right theologically.
But purely because those are the only characteristics that fit the logical axiom. It is and cannot not be. Logic isn't just a tool for Parmenides. He's saying the structure of logic is the structure of reality.
Making logic the basis of existence itself. That is a revolution.
It really sets the stage for pretty much all Western metaphysics that follows.
Okay, so let's bring this together. Xenophanes to Parmenides. It's clearly a major turning point. If we compare them directly, concept by concept, method by method, we should really see this shift from rational theology to pure ontology.
Yes, it becomes much clearer. It's that story of inheriting ideas, but revolutionizing the method.
All right, let's take unity, oneness. Xenophanes says, one God greatest. That sounds like a theological claim about supremacy.
Right, a statement about a God. Parmenides, though, deduces that what is must be a single, continuous, indivisible whole. It's a logical requirement for existence itself.
But Parmenides takes the idea of one and turns it from a quality of a supreme God into the definition of being.
Exactly. The one stops being a who and becomes the what of reality.
Okay, what about motion? Or rather, lack of motion? Xenophanes' God stays put because it's not seemly to move. It's about dignity.
Divine propriety again, but Parmenides' being is unmoved, remains the same and the same, because moving would require moving into what is not, which is logically impossible.
So same concept, stillness, but completely different justification. Theological propriety versus logical necessity.
Precisely. And you see the same pattern with eternity. Xenophanes didn't like the idea of gods being born. It implied they didn't exist before, which seemed wrong for an eternal being. Impious, maybe incoherent.
Makes sense. And Parmenides.
He deduces what is ungenerated and imperishable, strictly from the impossibility of coming from nothing or becoming nothing. Again, he takes a concept Xenophanes asserted based on piety and maybe some basic logic of eternal, and gives it this rigorous formal proof based on the no non-being rule.
What about thought or mind? Xenophanes' God has this active mind, right? Whole, he thinks, shakes all things by the thought of his mind.
An active, world-directing consciousness. Parmenides abstracts this completely into that fundamental identity. The same thing is for thinking and for being.
So the active divine mind becomes a static equation between thought and existence.
Essentially, yes. The thinking subject, God's mind, and the object being thought about, the world, they kind of collapse into this single identity, thought, being.
This really highlights the biggest difference, doesn't it? Their whole basis for knowing things, epistemology.
Without a doubt. Xenophanes, as we said, used multiple methods, reason, observation like the fossils, but always with that humility, that sense of dokos, opinion.
Methodological pluralism.
Right. Parmenides, total methodological monism, pure logic, a priori deduction, and a complete rejection of the senses, of empirical evidence, judged by logos alone.
That's the chasm. Parmenides basically takes Xenophanes' rational side, cranks it up to 11, and throws out the empirical fallible side completely.
You got it. And this explains some historical confusion, too. Later writers, the doxographers, sometimes try to make Xenophanes sound more like Parmenides. They elitized him.
Like attributing a spherical god to Xenophanes.
Exactly. That's almost certainly reading Parmenides' metaphor for being's perfection back onto Xenophanes. It shows people saw the connection, but it hides that crucial shift in method.
Because for Xenophanes, attributes like unity or stillness describe what the god is like. For Parmenides, they're the logical consequences that define what existence itself is.
Yes, and that distinction method is profound. Xenophanes was all about historiae inquiry, seeking. He accepted human knowledge as imperfect, dokos, but improvable. Parmenides just blows that up.
For Parmenides, there's no improving your view of the sensory world.
No. There's just the absolute truth derived from logos, and the total illusion offered by the senses. It's black and white.
And framing that purely logical argument as a divine revelation in a poem, that was clever.
A masterstroke. He uses the familiar authoritative form of epic poetry truth, revealed by muses, to deliver a message that grounds truth not in gods or myths, but in impersonal, universal reason itself.
Using the form of revelation to put logos on the throne.
Perfectly put. So the relationship, it's this process of logical purification, metaphysical abstraction. Xenophanes asks about the nature of a divine who. His God, however abstract, is still an agent.
While Parmenides asks about the nature of a impersonal what, his one being isn't an agent. It is the totality of reality, seen as this static logical block.
It's a move from critiquing bad representations of the divine flawed images, flawed stories, to developing a logic of existence itself.
Xenophanes wanted a better picture, even if the perfect picture was out of reach. Parmenides just sidesteps the whole picture problem.
Right. The way of truth isn't about describing what is. It's about deducing what it must be, logically, because thinking what is not is impossible.
The question shifts from what's the right way to think about the one to what does the concept to be logically require?
And that is the definitive step from theology talk about God to ontology talk about being.
Which helps make sense of that old teacher-student idea. Conceptually, maybe it's right, Xenophanes did introduce the core Eleatic idea of a single, eternal, unchanging reality.
But methodologically, it's misleading. Parmenides' pure deductive rationalism is a radical break, not just a continuation of Xenophanes' mixed approach.
So we've tracked this journey from Xenophanes' one God to Parmenides' one being. It's really a story of, yes, inheriting concepts, but absolutely revolutionizing the method.
Parmenides took that theological framework, supreme, unified, static divinity, and ideas Xenophanes forged and rebuilt it on a completely new foundation. deductive logic.
And in doing that, the ultimate reality changed character entirely. It went from being a god you might feel piety towards or critique rationally.
To becoming one being, an object for cold, hard, impersonal logical analysis. Xenophanes cleared the way, challenging myth, proposing a god consistent with reason. But he left that tension, using both reason and observation.
And Parmenides just sliced through that tension. He chose reason, pure reason, and made logic not just a tool, but the very fabric of reality.
By showing you could deduce what existence must be like just from the rules of thought, a priori, he carved out metaphysics as something distinct, separate from natural science, which uses the unreliable senses.
And separate from theology, which relies on faith or revelation.
He didn't just continue Xenophanes' work, he utterly transformed it. And in doing so, he laid down the tracks for Plato, Aristotle, and really the whole tradition of Western metaphysics.
Which leaves us, and you, the listener, with a final thought to chew on. Parmenides' radical claim, the same thing is for thinking and for being. The idea that the rules of logic dictate the rules of reality itself. How does that deep, ancient idea still echo today? How does it shape how we think about science or math or any kind of abstract reasoning? What does it mean for you, personally, if the very possibility of making sense of the world is tied to the fundamental nature of what is?
Something to think about.
Indeed. Until next time, keep digging deeper.